Ever wonder how modern art makes you feel? Not just that vague "I could have painted that" confusion, but the lingering sensation in your chest, the slowed breath, the way time slips just a little? It's not just aesthetics, it's psychology. More specifically, mindfulness, quietly laced into canvases, sculptures, and soundscapes across the art world. Tonight's journey is about peeling that open. Modern art meets mindfulness. And it's not some abstract theory. It's about how artists today use ancient practices like focused attention, breath awareness, and present moment consciousness to create works that aren't just seen, but felt. You're going to discover why looking at an odd monochrome square for longer than 30 seconds might just shift your state of mind. And what it means when artists say the canvas is meditating back. Imagine this, a single red brushstroke on a massive white wall. Silence. Then you notice your breathing change. Your thoughts slow down. And suddenly, it's not just a red line, it's the most intimate thing you've seen all day. You probably won't know this, but some of the most emotionally resonant galleries today are designed to manipulate your heart rate. Before you settle in, feel free to like the video if it brought you a little peace, and if you'd like to join us again, we'd love to have you back. Subscribe when you're ready. No pressure, just rest. Share something if you feel like it. Let's slowly drift into tonight's quiet moments together. You stand in front of a canvas. It's not shouting for attention. No dramatic dragons, no biblical floods. Just smears of blue. They're quiet. And so are you, for once. That's the gateway. Mindfulness in modern art starts with noticing what's already there, but we rarely do. Not because we're too busy, though yes, you are, but because our minds aren't trained to see slowly. Mindfulness, as defined by mainstream psychology, is the practice of non-judgmental awareness of the present moment. And here's where things get interesting. Studies from the University of Rochester and Harvard's Mind-Body Medical Institute have shown that engaging in slow, reflective observation, like watching clouds, or, say, a Rothko, can decrease cortisol levels. In other words, modern art, done right, literally relaxes your brain. But how did we get here? Once upon a time, art was about religion, royalty, and showing off that you could afford oil paint. Then came the 20th century. Painters like Agnes Martin, Yayoi Kusama, and Mark Rothko didn't want to illustrate, they wanted to still you. To slow you down long enough to feel something subtle. Something sacred. They weren't just painting, they were inviting you into a meditative state. Whether you accepted the invitation, well, that's on you. Let's peek behind the curtain. Many of these artists practiced mindfulness before it was cool. Agnes Martin meditated before each painting session. She called her studio a temple, and her canvases empty fields for the mind. In 2004, long after her death, neuroscientists began studying how abstract minimalist art activated the default mode network in the brain, linked to self-referential thought, introspection, and yes, meditative calm. Here's a weird tidbit. The Japanese concept of ma, the pause or negative space between sounds or images, is central to both Zen aesthetics and much of modern art. It's the breath between notes. The space between brushstrokes. Western curators, decades later, called this intentional silence. Philosophers still argue whether ma is a thing, or the absence of a thing. But in mindfulness art, the gap is the point. And then there's the audience. You. Me. Us weirdos standing silently in white rooms, pretending we get it. But what's really happening is neurological. According to a 2022 Stanford study, standing still and gazing at abstract shapes increases theta brainwave activity, the same waves activated during deep meditation and REM sleep. So yes, when you zone out in a gallery, you might be entering a mini trance. No incense required. Weirdly, some people hate this. Critics call mindfulness art pretentious, empty, or even manipulative. And sure, staring at a blank canvas while someone whispers presence in your ear can feel a bit culty. But art doesn't care if it annoys you, it's still rewiring your nervous system. Think of Marina Abramovic sitting silently across from strangers at MoMA for 700 hours. No paint. No movement. Just presence. People wept. One guy proposed. Why? Because we are starved for sustained attention. And the art world, surprisingly, is one of the last places where that's still expected of you. Now, not all modern artists are mindfulness gurus. Some are just making cool stuff. But the psychology behind the experience? That's hardwired. When you enter a gallery, your amygdala scans for threats. Your eyes track for patterns. But when nothing happens, your mind is forced inward. You reflect. You feel. You breathe. And here's the kicker, mindfulness-based art isn't just for snooty institutions. Street art can do it. Digital loops on your screensaver can do it. Even a hand-painted rock on a park bench can jolt you into the present moment if you really see it. You start noticing texture. Not metaphorically, literally. Brush hairs, ridges, light bouncing at weird angles. And suddenly, you're aware of your own breath again. That, my friend, is the loop. Awareness breeds perception, and perception deepens awareness. Still skeptical? Good. Skepticism means you're thinking. But as we move forward, let's set aside judgment for just a bit. Pretend this is all one big thought experiment where you, yes, you, are the canvas, and everything you hear is a brushstroke. Take one last look at that blue smear. Then let your gaze drift. The next piece is waiting, quiet and patient. Now you're in the studio. Not yours, don't panic, but the artist's. It smells faintly of turpentine, stale coffee, and something almost sweet, maybe lavender oil, or just creative stress. You hear the soft tap of brush handles against glass jars. Someone exhales. That's your cue. Because this section isn't about you looking at the art. It's about you becoming the artist. Welcome to the psychology of breath. There's a myth that artists are tortured souls working in manic bursts of passion. Sometimes true. But more often, it's slow, repetitive, almost meditative work, especially for those who use mindfulness as part of their process. You probably don't picture Jackson Pollock as a Zen master, but the physical rhythm of his drip technique? Pure moving meditation. Breathe, swing, release, repeat. Modern artists increasingly start their sessions with grounding rituals, breath work, short meditations, even walking barefoot in the studio just to reconnect. The point? Presence. Being in the body, not the inbox. A recent survey published in Psychology of Aesthetics, Creativity, and the Arts found that artists who engage in pre-creative mindfulness routines report significantly higher flow states and creative satisfaction. Translation: mindful artists make better art and feel better doing it. Now picture this, you're standing in front of a blank canvas. Not white, it's more of a hungry emptiness. The kind that stares back. Your palms sweat. You doubt yourself. But then you breathe in through the nose, slowly. Out through the mouth. 3 counts. Again. A little slower. Your heart stops kicking at your ribs. Your brush hand steadies. That's the moment. Not flashy, not divine, just present. This isn't just a trend. It's biology. Mindfulness activates the parasympathetic nervous system, the rest and digest state, reducing adrenaline and increasing dopamine. Artists often report an almost trance-like sensation when fully absorbed in their work. This aligns with Mihai Csikszentmihalyi's flow theory, which describes a mental state where challenge and skill are perfectly balanced. But here's the twist, mindfulness lowers the bar. You don't need to be perfect to enter flow, you just need to be here. A fringe case? Meet the painter who refused to paint unless she'd done an hour of silent walking in a labyrinth first. Every morning. Rain or shine. Her studio was surrounded by tall reeds and mosquito swarms, but she claimed her paint knew the difference when she skipped it. Her art? Surprisingly tranquil. Even critics called it centered. Philosophers still argue whether mindfulness enhances creativity or just makes us tolerate mediocrity with more grace. One camp believes it clears mental clutter, allowing pure ideas to surface. The other says it dulls edge, removes urgency, turns fire into warm bathwater. But maybe that's a false choice. Maybe mindfulness doesn't erase the fire, it just makes sure you don't burn your fingers off. Let's talk materials. The brush becomes a breath. The paint, a pulse. Each gesture is a conversation between the conscious and unconscious. Artists often describe the canvas as speaking back to them, not in words, of course, but in subtle resistance. A tug here. A mistake there. The mindful painter doesn't fight this, they adapt. Flow around the blotch. Turn the drip into a bird. Be the Bob Ross you want to see in the world. There's a psychological term for this flexibility, cognitive elasticity. And mindfulness trains it. Studies have shown that regular mindfulness practitioners exhibit greater divergent thinking, the ability to generate novel ideas from simple prompts. Which is exactly what art demands. Want to turn a spoon into a political statement? You'll need a flexible mind, and maybe a pedestal. You might be wondering if mindfulness makes the art better. That depends. On who's looking. On what better even means. A Zen ink painting can take 5 seconds to create, but years of training to prepare for. Mindfulness isn't about labor, it's about presence. And when presence gets into the pigment, viewers feel it. Weird psychology tidbit: in a 2018 experiment, participants were shown 2 sets of artworks, one made during a guided mindfulness state, one made by the same artist while multitasking. Viewers overwhelmingly described the mindful pieces as calmer, more intentional, and emotionally resonant, even though they didn't know which was which. Our brains, apparently, can sniff out presence. So what happens if the artist loses it? If the breath gets shallow, the thoughts race, the brush clenches like a weapon? The art shifts. Tension appears. Not always in a bad way. Some artists use that friction. But the mindful creator learns to pause. To back away. To sit. To breathe again. It's a rhythm: inhale, observe, express, exhale. There's an old painter's superstition: never finish a piece in a bad mood, it traps the energy. Superstitious? Absolutely. But there's something poetic there. A belief that emotion, focus, and breath linger in the work. That the viewer can feel what you felt while you made it. And sometimes, they really can. Remember that story about the monk who raked the same Zen garden for 40 years, never once calling it done? That's the painter scraping layers of gesso for the 100th time, not for perfection, but for presence. You don't finish the painting. The painting finishes you. And so you return to the brush. It's heavier than you remember. But your hand is steadier. You breathe in. You breathe out. You begin again. Now shift your weight. You're no longer behind the brush, you're in front of the frame. Maybe you're standing. Maybe sitting on one of those awkward benches that never quite lets your feet rest flat. A room hushes around you, cool with climate control and the vague scent of varnish. The painting waits. You wait. And this, believe it or not, is where the mindfulness begins. Because here's a truth most gallery goers don't admit: we don't actually look. Not really. The average visitor spends 11 seconds per artwork, according to a well-worn MoMA study. That's barely enough time to read the placard, let alone feel anything. But when you do slow down, something strange happens. You begin to see. And in seeing, you begin to feel. So let's do it. Pick one painting. Doesn't matter which. Could be a massive neon triptych or a little square faded pastel. Doesn't matter if you like it. That's not the point. Just look. Settle into it like you would a campfire or a window in the rain. Let your eyes soften. Let your breath settle. You're not analyzing. You're attuning. This is mindful viewing. No checklist. No critique. Just presence. A 2021 study from the University of Vienna found that museum visitors who practiced mindful observation, slowing their breathing, noticing physical sensations, releasing judgment, reported higher emotional impact from the artworks and longer retention of the experience. In short, they didn't just see more, they felt more. Want something weirder? In one French experiment, participants wore biometric sensors while viewing abstract art. Heart rate slowed. Pupil dilation increased. Their EEG scans showed enhanced alpha brainwave activity, commonly associated with calm focus. A few even reported mild euphoria. Yes, from staring at paint. So why does this work? Simple, art holds still. In a world of scrolls and swipes, art asks nothing except that you stop moving. It doesn't flash. It doesn't ping. It waits. And in that stillness, you meet yourself. The painting doesn't change, but your mind does. That's mindfulness. Now here's where it gets juicy. Sometimes, what you see in the painting isn't in the painting. It's a projection. Your mood, your memories, your mess. You look at a piece and think, wow, this reminds me of my grandmother's porch. The artist never knew your grandmother. But somehow, in the colors or composition or tilt of a shape, you found her. That's the magic of perception. And mindful viewing helps tease it out. Philosophers still argue whether the meaning of art lies in the object or the observer. Is it what the artist intended, or what you interpret? The mindful camp says, both. It's a conversation. One where silence speaks just as loudly. Consider the phenomenon of slow art. Museums around the world now host slow art days, where patrons are encouraged to spend 10 full minutes with a single work. No phones. No chit-chat. Just pure, open-ended attention. Many participants report unexpected emotional responses, tears, laughter, deep calm. Not because the art changed, but because they did. And then there's the environment. Ever notice how some museums make you whisper? The hush isn't just about etiquette, it's about mood regulation. Lower volume means lower heart rate. The temperature is cool because calm minds prefer cooler spaces. Even the lighting is tuned to enhance focus and reduce fatigue. In other words, the museum is already nudging you toward mindfulness, you just have to let it. Let's pause on one odd case. In Tokyo, there's a gallery with no art. Just blank walls, soft lighting, and a timed bell every 10 minutes. The point? You view your own awareness. It's performance art meets mindfulness lab. Reactions range from enlightenment to existential panic. But hey, nobody said introspection was comfy. If this all sounds a little woo-woo, that's fair. But keep this in mind, mindfulness doesn't mean zoning out. It means zoning in. Hyper-attentiveness. Noticing without naming. Observing without opinion. You're not deciding if a brushstroke is good. You're noticing the way the light pools inside it. You're seeing how your chest feels when you look at that jagged corner. That's real data. That's you in process. And let's not ignore the modern trap, documentation. The urge to snap a photo, share a story, prove you were there. But the moment you pull out your phone, you switch roles. You stop being the witness and become the archivist. That's not inherently bad, but it's not mindful. Try leaving the phone down. Just for one painting. Let the moment go unposted. You might find it sticks with you longer. You might notice something else too. Time gets weird. 10 minutes with a painting can feel like 2 or 20. That's temporal dilation, a known effect of deep attentional states. Meditation does it. So does grief. So does love. And apparently, so does looking at a canvas with your full attention. So here's your takeaway: you don't need to understand the art. You don't need to like it. You only need to be with it. Let it unfold at its own pace. Let your reactions rise and fall without grabbing them. Let yourself be bored. Or curious. Or oddly moved by a square of beige. That's the practice. Because when you stop rushing from frame to frame, you start to notice something subtle. Your mind stops tripping over itself. Your breath deepens. You don't just see the art, you meet it. And maybe, for a moment, you meet yourself. You take a step back. Literally. One step is all it takes to go from being inside a piece of art to observing its edges. And now, in front of you, is something that seems to barely exist at all, a white square on a white wall. You squint. Is that it? No loud colors. No heroic subjects. No tortured brushwork. Just silence. Welcome to the quiet revolution of minimalist art, where nothing shouts but everything speaks. Minimalism is easy to overlook, intentionally so. It doesn't beg for your attention. It's the introvert at the party, tucked in the corner, radiating calm confidence. It trusts you'll come when you're ready. And if you do, if you lean in, it offers you something precious in today's visual chaos: peace. In the psychology of mindfulness, there's a concept called stimulus reduction. The fewer distractions, the more clearly your mind begins to see itself. Minimalist art works on this exact principle. By stripping away the noise, it invites you to hear your own internal soundtrack. That slightly anxious flutter? That sudden memory of your dentist's office? That's not the painting. That's you, suddenly audible. Mainstream psychology backs this up. A 2017 paper in the Journal of Cognitive Enhancement found that low stimulation environments promote interoceptive awareness. That's your ability to sense internal bodily states, like heartbeat, breath, and muscle tension. So when you're standing in front of a canvas that looks like a blank napkin, it's not just your eyes working. It's your whole nervous system tuning in. Of course, not everyone's into it. Minimalist art has a long history of infuriating critics. My toddler could do that, they say. And maybe they could. But the question isn't what was made, it's how you engage with it. Minimalism is less about content and more about context. It's not telling a story, it's clearing space for your story to unfold. Here's a quirky case: the artist Robert Ryman famously painted hundreds of nearly identical white-on-white canvases. No tricks, no images, just subtle shifts in texture and brushstroke. His reason? He wanted to make painting itself visible. Philosophers still argue whether that's profound or a prank. But viewers report a curious effect. After a few minutes, the eye starts picking up ghost colors, tiny shadows, flickers of difference. Your mind, deprived of distraction, begins to invent its own drama. That's mindfulness at work. Noticing the unnoticed. Finding richness in restraint. The same way a single breath, taken slowly, can feel like a revelation. Let's talk space. Negative space, to be specific. In art and mindfulness, it's not just the thing itself, but the space around the thing that matters. Zen gardens know this. So do architects. And so do minimalist painters. They use space as silence. Absence becomes presence. One brushstroke becomes meaningful because of the vast calm around it. In one experiment, participants were shown two versions of the same geometric artwork, one with busy surrounding elements, the other surrounded by white space. The second version triggered more contemplative responses, slower eye movements, and a higher reported sense of emotional clarity. Not joy. Not sadness. Just clarity. That's what the white wall can do. And then there's repetition. Minimalist artists love it. Lines repeated. Shapes duplicated. Why? Because your brain, confronted with sameness, eventually gives up on interpretation and slips into observation. You stop asking, "What does this mean?" and start asking, "What am I feeling right now?" That shift? That's mindfulness cracking your frontal cortex like an egg. A fringe example: in 1970s New York, artist Agnes Deans filled notebooks with grids of dots she hand-inked while meditating. No audience, no gallery, just dots. When asked why, she said it helped her trace thought without interfering with it. Imagine that, drawing as a kind of psychological seismograph. And look, let's be honest, sometimes, minimalist art does look like a scam. A canvas painted entirely in gray with a pretentious name like Requiem for the Silence Within. Number 4. You have every right to raise an eyebrow. But give it a minute. Take a few breaths. Soften your gaze. And see what happens when your brain doesn't have a plot to chase. Because the truth is, minimalism mirrors meditation. You sit down. Close your eyes. Nothing happens. And then, everything does. But it only unfolds if you let it. The empty canvas becomes a mirror. Not just reflecting your face, but your interior weather. The stuff you didn't realize you were carrying until the painting held it for you. Here's the kicker: the more minimalist the art, the more maximal the mindfulness effect. That's what makes it a radical practice in disguise. In a world that screams for your attention, this art whispers. And that whisper is yours, echoed back through brushstroke and silence. So next time you see a blank-looking square in a museum, don't roll your eyes. Stand still. Breathe. Wait. And see what shows up, not on the canvas, but in you. You're blinking. A little dazed. Because now, the walls are shouting again. Shapes collide, colors scream, lines twist in ways that make your stomach drop. Welcome to the abstract wing. This isn't quiet minimalism anymore. This is messy, emotional, full-contact art. The kind you don't just see, you feel. And sometimes, it feels like a punch. But here's the twist: this chaos is mindful too. Yes, even the tangled, turbulent world of abstract expressionism can be a temple, just a louder one. Tonight, we wade into the emotional whirlpools of messy minds and abstract lines. Imagine watching someone fling paint like it owes them money. That's Jackson Pollock. Or someone layering oily reds over slashes of black until the canvas is a battlefield. Hello, Franz Klein. These aren't just fits of artistic drama. Many abstract artists worked from an intensely mindful place, even if their work looks like it was made during a blackout on roller skates. Take Mark Rothko, again. His paintings? Floating rectangles of color that look almost lazy. But stare at one long enough, and something shifts. Your chest tightens. Or softens. Maybe you tear up, and you're not even sure why. Rothko once said he wanted viewers to be enveloped by his work, to feel a kind of sacred intimacy. Not exactly the language of chaos. Let's talk brain science. When viewers engage with abstract art, especially art without clear figures or subjects, something fascinating happens. The visual cortex goes looking for patterns, fails, and then something deeper kicks in. Emotional memory areas light up. A 2014 fMRI study from the University of London found that abstract art triggers the same brain areas activated during intense personal reflection. In other words, your brain treats it like a mirror for your inner life. That's why some people cry in front of art that looks like spilled soup. And why others feel nothing. It's not about what's on the canvas, it's about what's happening in you. Abstract art doesn't tell you what to feel. It asks you what you're already feeling. Mindfulness, right there in oil and confusion. But how does mindfulness come into the creation of chaos? Simple: presence in motion. Many abstract artists used active, body-focused techniques that overlap directly with mindfulness practices. They meditated, not to calm, but to charge. They painted to feel, not to depict. Movement becomes mantra. Gesture becomes breath. Fringe example: the Gutai group in 1950s Japan staged painting performances where artists would wrestle canvases, throw themselves across wet paper, or smash ink balloons with sticks. Wild? Yes. But deeply intentional. They called it the scream of matter itself. Try that at your next paint and sip. There's also the curious case of automatic drawing, an early 20th century practice inspired by Freudian free association and spiritualist trance. Artists would enter a meditative state and let their hands move without conscious control. The result? Scribbles that often held uncanny personal or symbolic meaning. Carl Jung dabbled in this. So did Kandinsky. Some believed the unconscious knew things the conscious mind didn't. Philosophers still argue whether this is psychology or spiritual theater, but it sure feels mindful when your pen starts predicting your dreams. In mindfulness terms, this is called observing the observer. Letting thoughts, images, feelings arise and pass without clinging. Abstract artists mastered this long before it showed up in wellness apps. They created not to resolve, but to witness. And they invite you to do the same. No explanations. No captions. Just look. Just feel. Now, this kind of art can be uncomfortable. That's the point. A scribbled black vortex might stir anxiety. A jagged red smear might feel like anger. And here's the catch, those feelings aren't in the paint. They're in you. The art just makes space for them. Mindfulness isn't always soft. Sometimes it drags the mess into the light and says, look. Sit with this. And here's the psychology kicker, that's healthy. According to emotion regulation theory, naming and noticing difficult feelings without immediately trying to change them is one of the most powerful tools for mental well-being. Abstract art gives you that chance. It stirs the pot, then waits. You get to choose how long to watch it boil. Of course, some days, you won't be in the mood. You'll look at a canvas full of angry slashes and think, I'd rather be looking at a tree. That's valid. Mindfulness doesn't demand engagement, it invites it. But if you can stay with the discomfort, sometimes it opens into clarity. Or catharsis. Or just the gentle surprise of realizing you're still breathing. One more oddity, some abstract artists intentionally include flaws, a wonky corner, an uneven drip, as a reminder that presence matters more than perfection. That's a powerful message, especially in a culture obsessed with polish. The messy canvas becomes a permission slip. You don't have to be neat. You don't have to be fixed. You just have to be here. So the next time you see a tangled mess of paint and feel like rolling your eyes, pause. Take a breath. Ask yourself not what is this supposed to be, but what am I bringing to it? Let the chaos show you your own. And when you turn away, you might notice something unexpected, the world feels quieter. As if, by staring into the storm, you found a little stillness inside it. The room cools. You walk into a space where art stops pretending to float and starts to weigh something, literally. No more brushstrokes or digital illusions. Now, it's all mass and texture, bronze, stone, clay, thread. You're in the presence of sculpture, and for once, the art takes up just as much space as you do. Maybe more. This is where mindfulness becomes tactile. Welcome to the psychology of sculpting stillness. You don't just see a sculpture. You orbit it. Move around it. Look down at it. Look up. Your body becomes part of the artwork's experience. That shift, going from passive viewer to embodied participant, is at the heart of mindful awareness. Your muscles engage. Your balance adjusts. Your breath changes as you bend or lean. Congratulations, you're now doing mindful movement. In a museum. Sculpture, unlike most 2D art, has weight. It occupies space. It casts shadows that shift with the light. You feel its presence even when your eyes are closed. And your brain? Oh, it loves this. A 2016 study in Frontiers in Human Neuroscience found that viewers of large-scale sculpture showed increased activity in the somatosensory cortex, the part of the brain responsible for body awareness. Basically, looking at sculpture makes you feel your own shape more clearly. Even weirder? People unconsciously mirror what they see. Stand near a sculpture of someone stretching, and you might find yourself standing a little taller. It's a phenomenon called kinesthetic empathy. Your neurons, especially the mirror ones, are quietly mimicking the pose and energy of the piece. That's not just observation, it's embodied mindfulness. Take Henry Moore's abstract reclining figures. They don't look like humans exactly. But people report feeling relaxed, grounded, or even melted just looking at them. There's something about their curves, their weight, There's stillness that invites your nervous system to do the same. Breathe slower. Loosen the jaw. Become soft rock. Contrast that with something like a Louise Bourgeois spider, huge, looming, full of maternal unease. You might feel a pulse of fear, or fascination, or just a subtle tightening in your spine. Mindfulness in this context doesn't mean feeling calm. It means noticing exactly what you feel, without looking away. That's the psychology hook. Sculpture activates our primal senses. You could touch it. Climb it. Please don't. It has temperature, texture, even scent, if you dare lean close enough. Artists know this. Many sculptors use raw or natural materials, wood, bone, earth, not for aesthetics alone, but because those elements trigger our most ancient sensory memories. Clay isn't just clay. It's dirt, mud, childhood, burial, rebirth. All of it. All at once. There's also the slow process of making sculpture. A sculptor doesn't sprint. They carve. Sand. Mold. Wait. Dry. Return. The physicality of it demands patience. And presence. A single misaligned strike can ruin hours of work. Or transform it. Either way, the sculptor has to stay here. Their body, breath, and focus are part of every groove. Fringe example? A small but passionate group of artists sculpt entirely underwater. Wearing weights and goggles, they craft reef-safe figures in the ocean itself, watching fish swim by mid-gesture. They call it collaboration with the currents. Is that practical? Absolutely not. Is it mindful? Utterly. Philosophers still argue whether sculpture is narrative or object. Does it tell a story, or just exist as itself? But mindfulness sidesteps that debate. It asks, what do you feel, here and now, in your body, as you experience this mass? Whether it's a bronze dancer or a twisted tangle of wire, what is it doing to you? Let's slow down for one particularly mindful tradition, the Japanese art of netsuke. Tiny, intricate sculptures used as toggles for robes. Some are no larger than a thumb. They were carved slowly, meditatively, sometimes over months. And despite their size, they hold a peculiar gravity. Hold one in your palm, and time stretches. You begin to trace details you didn't see. A fold of fabric. A tiny smirk. Presence is suddenly compressed into this dense little relic. Or look to the Inuit practice of soapstone carving. The artist begins not with a vision, but with a rock. The rock tells them what it wants to become. The process is slow, gentle. Dust everywhere. The final piece often seems to emerge rather than be forced. Sculptors describe it as a listening act. A conversation. That's pure mindfulness. And here's something sweet, viewers of sculpture often slow their walking pace, more than in any other gallery. Why? Because you can't speed read a statue. You have to move with it. Around it. Let it reveal its secrets one angle at a time. Your pace mirrors your perception. Slower walk, deeper seeing. Deeper seeing, fuller feeling. So next time you find yourself facing a sculpture, don't just glance. Let your eyes wander its edges. Let your breath match its rhythm. If it's smooth, let yourself soften. If it's jagged, let yourself tense, then notice. Let the stillness of the form shape the stillness in you. Because in a world that moves too fast, sculpture does something radical, it waits. And in its waiting, it teaches you to wait, too. To breathe. To sense. To be. Suddenly, the color hits you. Not a shape, not a figure, just color. Vast swaths of red that hum like a cello, or soft foggy greens that feel like early mornings in some town you've never been to but swear you've dreamed of. You're not thinking in words anymore. You're reacting in temperature. Emotion. Pulse. Welcome to color meditation, the vivid intersection of chromatic psychology and mindfulness. You already know color affects mood. Everyone's heard that blue is calming and red is energizing, right? But that's just the surface. Beneath it lies a much stranger truth. When you observe color mindfully, it stops being background decoration and starts becoming an emotional language, one you don't need to translate to understand. Let's start with the science. Color perception is processed in the occipital lobe, but its emotional interpretation lights up the limbic system, home of memory and feeling. A 2019 study from the University of Sussex showed that people who practiced mindful attention to color, literally staring at one hue and noting every nuance without labeling or judging, experienced a measurable drop in stress markers. Their heart rates slowed. Their EEGs showed increased alpha waves. Their breath deepened, even without any guided meditation. Just color. Just looking. That sounds like a superpower, doesn't it? Just staring at a yellow square and lowering your blood pressure? But the artists already knew this. Long before we had fMRIs and psych labs, painters like Joseph Albers and Helen Frankenthaler were treating color like sacred geometry. Albers once spent 6 months mixing dozens of shades of blue until he found the exact one that made his spine feel like it was humming. That wasn't superstition. That was somatic feedback. That was mindfulness in pigment form. Color field artists in the mid-20th century knew their pieces would be mocked. Critics called them giant paint swatches. But for viewers willing to slow down and stay with it, these canvases act like tuning forks. They vibrate inside you. They teach you to feel color again, not just see it. A French case? The monochrome painter Yves Klein created a shade so intense, he patented it. International Klein Blue. Just blue. Deep, bottomless, unrelenting blue. He claimed it evoked the void, the infinite, the immaterial. Viewers stood before his canvases and wept. And no, it wasn't from boredom. They were feeling something primal. Some didn't even have the words. They just knew they'd been opened. Philosophers still argue whether color carries universal emotional tones or if they're culturally constructed. Is red passion or danger? Is green serenity or envy? The mindful response says, it's whatever you bring to it in that moment. The practice isn't about assigning meaning, it's about noticing the feeling without the story. Try this, imagine a wall painted entirely in soft lavender. You sit with it. First you see the color. Then you notice your breath. Then, maybe, an old memory rises, your grandmother's scarf, or the bedroom you painted the year you finally lived alone. That's the color doing its work. Not loudly. Just gently coaxing something forward. Or flip it. Picture a loud, aggressive orange red. It feels hot, too close, like the inside of a heated argument. Your shoulders tighten. That's also the practice. Not all mindful moments are bliss. Some are bright. And that discomfort? That's data. You're learning your internal climate, one hue at a time. There's also the strange magic of color transitions. Mindfulness teachers sometimes use color watching exercises, watching the sky shift at sunset or a lava lamp pulse and bleed. The mind, deprived of narrative, drops into pure sensation. That liminal space, where one shade becomes another, is where awareness stretches out and stops trying so hard. Your breath follows suit. Want a tactile version? Look at the art of Sheila Hicks. Her fiber sculptures explode with saturated color, but also softness, texture, bend. Viewers describe feeling held by her work, even without touching it. That's color as embrace. Mindful chromatics. Emotional textiles. And don't forget cultural color psychology. In some Tibetan traditions, colors are used in meditation to align energy centers. Not metaphorically. Literally. Red grounds. Yellow clarifies. Blue soothes. Whether you believe in chakras or not, the consistent human response to these shades across continents is, frankly, hard to ignore. Color can also be disorienting. Artist James Turrell plays with light and pigment in ways that make viewers lose all depth perception. You walk into one of his color-saturated spaces, and suddenly you can't tell where the walls end or begin. People describe it as a form of perceptual silence, no edges, no shape, just pure experience. Some stay in his installations for hours, emerging blinking, quiet, deeply moved. That's meditation without a mantra. And here's something beautiful, you don't need a gallery for this. Color meditation can happen anywhere. A red leaf on the sidewalk. The blue glow of your phone screen in the dark. The way gold light hits the wall at 4 p.m. The trick is to notice. To see into the color, not just past it. So here's a practice for you. Tomorrow, pick one color. Just one. And spend the day noticing it, without labeling, judging, or trying to explain it. How does it make you feel in your body? What does it whisper to your breath? What memory does it summon? That's not just mindfulness. That's color as therapy. As invitation. As mirror. And when you next find yourself in front of a canvas that looks like just blue, or just yellow, remember this, you're not just looking. You're absorbing. Resonating. Shifting. Because sometimes, the color doesn't change. You do. The room goes dim. Not because the lights are out, but because the art has moved. It's no longer on a wall, or mounted on a pedestal. It's breathing. Walking. Whispering. Maybe it's dancing in slow motion, or sitting in complete silence, eyes locked with yours. Welcome to the world of performance art, where the line between artist and audience dissolves, and mindfulness doesn't just hover in the air, it is the air. Here, the art happens now, and never again quite the same way. Every gesture is ephemeral. Every moment unrepeatable. If that's not mindfulness, what is? Performance art was never supposed to be comfortable. It emerged in the 1960s and 70s as a direct challenge to the permanence and polish of traditional art. Where paintings hung quietly, performers demanded presence. Demanded that you not look away. And in doing so, they tapped into something deeply psychological, our craving for real-time, unscripted connection. Let's start with Marina Abramovic, because how could we not? You might have heard of the artist as Present, her now legendary MoMA piece where she sat silently for 736 hours while strangers took turns sitting across from her. No talking. No touching. Just being. It sounds simple. But participants wept. Shook. Froze. Because when someone is truly, utterly present with you, it's unnerving. Beautiful. Intimate. That's the potency of shared mindfulness. Psychologists studying the piece later noted that both participants and observers showed heightened signs of parasympathetic nervous system activity, indicating relaxation, lowered stress, and increased emotional receptivity. In short, sitting silently with another person while holding eye contact is a high-impact mindfulness practice, even in a museum full of tourists. But let's zoom in on the performers. For them, mindfulness isn't optional, it's fuel. To stay in character, in stillness, or in motion for hours at a time requires razor-sharp present moment awareness. One slip, and the illusion breaks. So they train like meditators. Breath awareness. Sensory tuning. Radical acceptance of discomfort. This is meditation in motion, on a stage. One fringe artist in Berlin once staged a week-long piece called Sleep With Me, where she simply slept in a glass box while visitors watched. She practiced mindfulness before each performance, entering sleep like a ceremony. People described watching her breathe as spiritually centering. Others found it creepy. Both are valid. Art doesn't promise comfort, it promises presence. Philosophers still argue whether performance art is even art at all. Is it theater? Is it therapy? Is it endurance sport? The answer might be, yes. And also, SHHH. You're missing it. What makes performance art so aligned with mindfulness is its nowness. You can't fast forward it. You can't scroll past. You are forced to sit with the pace the artist sets, even if it's glacial. Especially if it's glacial. And in that slowness, your nervous system begins to recalibrate. Breath softens. Mind drifts. Then returns. That's the loop of attention. That's the breath of awareness. Another key quality? Vulnerability. Many performances strip the artist down to emotional, or literal, nakedness. There's a reason for that. In mindfulness, there's the concept of radical honesty, facing what is, without pretense or armor. Performance art often embodies this idea in the most visible way possible. A trembling hand. A strained silence. A raw voice reciting a personal story. These moments draw you in, and ask not that you interpret, but that you witness. Take Touching C, who once performed an art piece where he punched a time clock every hour for a full year. He took a single photo with each punch. By the end, the result wasn't just a brutal schedule, it was a portrait of presence, discipline, and time's slow war on the body. Some call it madness. Others call it the most mindful act imaginable. Neither is wrong. Mindfulness also shows up in audience reactions. When you're watching a performance that's painfully slow or subtly strange, your brain starts inventing meaning. You interpret the tilt of a head. The way a hand lingers on a cup. This projection isn't confusion, it's a sign your brain is awake. You're not zoning out. You're zoning in. A 2020 study published in Psychology of Aesthetics found that live performance viewing boosts mirror neuron activity and empathy scores significantly more than static art. Simply put, when you watch a real person perform, even silently, your body feels with them. That's mindfulness by proxy. And not all performances are solemn. Some are hilarious, absurd, delightfully weird. A woman slowly eating a room made of cake. A man pretending to be a fern for 4 hours. Why? Maybe just to see what happens to your attention. Can you stay present even in the ridiculous? That's a form of advanced practice, right there. Sometimes, performance art becomes interactive. You're not just watching, you're in it. You're given instructions. You're asked to write something, touch something, move somewhere. Suddenly, your heart races. Your hands sweat. You're not passive anymore. You're participating. This, too, is a mindfulness test. Can you act and remain aware? Can you engage and observe yourself simultaneously? It's harder than it sounds. But it's also transformative. Because once you've truly experienced mindful performance art, felt it in your gut, your breath, your bones, you start to notice something eerie. Everything else feels a little bit like performance, too. The way you talk, sit, scroll, eat, the roles you play, the scripts you follow. And that realization doesn't have to be scary. It can be liberating. If life is performance, maybe you can step back from the script. Maybe you can rewrite it. Or maybe, just maybe, you can stop acting and start being. The room opens up. No more frames. No neat little labels or velvet ropes. Instead, you step into the art. It surrounds you, light, sound, objects, sometimes even scent or heat. You're not a viewer anymore. You're inside the experience. Welcome to the world of immersive installations, where mindfulness isn't just encouraged, it's engineered. Installations blur the line between reality and imagination. They ask you not to look at them, but to move through them, with them. You walk slowly. You pause without quite knowing why. Maybe you duck under hanging fabric or tiptoe across a floor covered in rice or velvet or dirt. The rules of everyday space are gone. You're somewhere else now. And your nervous system knows it. This is the psychology of environmental presence. When the senses are gently overloaded, layered textures, shifting lights, ambient sounds, your internal chatter quiets down. You drop out of analysis and into awareness. It's the same effect that happens in nature. A concept called soft fascination, identified by attention restoration theory, where subtle, non-threatening stimuli, like rustling leaves or birdsong, engage the mind just enough to occupy the conscious layer, while the deeper brainwaves slow. Installation art mimics this. Intentionally. Take Yayoi Kusuma's infinity mirror rooms. You step in, and suddenly you're floating. Lights reflect off mirrors in all directions. Time seems to pause. Most people emerge quiet, blinking, a little stunned. That's not just aesthetics, that's temporary ego dissolution. A psychological phenomenon linked to deep mindfulness and certain forms of meditation. Or Olafur Eliassen's The Weather Project, where a giant simulated sun glowed in a foggy room at the Tate Modern. People lay on the floor like lizards, just soaking in the warm amber light. They whispered. Or didn't speak at all. Why? Because when your body thinks it's outside, and safe, and held, your stress response switches off. Just like that. There's a fringe case of an artist who built an entire installation from crushed rose petals and heated copper plates. The scent was overwhelming. Visitors described it as emotional ambush. One person burst into tears, recalling their late grandmother's perfume. Another reported feeling cradled. The installation didn't show you anything. It activated you. Mindfulness doesn't always start in the brain. Sometimes, it begins in the nose. Philosophers still argue whether installations are too manipulative to be true art. Are they immersive or coercive? Are you surrendering to an experience, or being hijacked? But mindfulness doesn't require moral clarity. It asks only, are you aware of your sensations? Are you present inside this moment? Whether it's real, simulated, or somewhere in between, that's your call. One key feature of installations? Time slows. You walk differently. Linger. Drift. The external pace begins to sync with your internal one. That's no accident. Many artists use spatial design to guide tempo. Narrow halls that force you to move slowly. Soft sounds that dissolve urgency. Curves that delay direct paths. It's like guided meditation, except the floor is part of it. And here's something curious, because you're moving through the artwork, you become part of it. Your silhouette in the shadows. Your footsteps on the gravel. Your breath fogging the glass. Installation artists talk about the unintentional choreography of viewers, the unplanned, organic dance of human presence within the space. It's not performance, exactly. But it's not either. Want a quiet example? James Turrell again. One of his works, Aiton Rain, bathed a massive rotunda in shifting light over several minutes. There was nothing to do. Just sit. Watch. Breathe. People described losing track of their bodies. Or feeling like the ceiling had opened to the sky. Some even said they became light. That's poetic, yes, but also deeply somatic. You're not hallucinating. You're just extending perception beyond habit. Let's flip it. What about harsh installations? The kind that confront you. That make you uncomfortable. Like Doris Salcedo's shibboleth, a literal crack in the floor of the Tate Modern, jagged, black, uncrossable. Or Kara Walker's monumental sugar-coated Sphinx, which evoked slavery and exploitation with haunting beauty. These aren't restful. But they're mindful. They demand attention. They don't let you look away. And in that confrontation, you face not just the artwork, but your own reactions. This is the heart of mindful installations, response without distraction. You don't need to analyze what you feel. Just know that you're feeling it. That's powerful. That's psychological depth. And unlike traditional art, installations often fade. They're built to be dismantled. Temporary. Fleeting. Just like mindful awareness itself. The present moment doesn't stick around for long. But when you're inside it, everything slows. You remember every breath, every footstep, every suspended particle of dust. Odd fact, a study from 2022 found that visitors to immersive art environments remembered more sensory details and reported higher emotional impact than those who saw traditional artworks in the same amount of time. Even weeks later, installation viewers could describe textures, smells, and their own emotional state with uncanny precision. That's the memory signature of presence. And maybe that's what installations teach best. You don't need a canvas to have an experience. You don't need paint to be moved. All you need is the willingness to walk into the unfamiliar with open senses. To let a room rearrange your attention. To surrender to a space designed not to impress you, but to hold you. So the next time you find yourself inside an artwork, resist the urge to rush. Linger. Sit. Let the light flicker across your skin. Let your breath echo in the corners. Let the floor guide your step. This is no longer just art. This is you, moving through mindfulness. Now listen. Not metaphorically. Literally. Close your eyes if you need to. Somewhere in the distance, there's a low hum, maybe from a ceiling vent, maybe from an installation. There's a clicking shoe. A faint cough. Then, something else, silence. Weighted. Measured. Designed. You've just entered the acoustic zone of modern art. Here, the brushstroke is sound, and the canvas? Your awareness. This is the sound of stillness, where audio art and ambient compositions meet the psychology of mindfulness head-on. In traditional galleries, sound is an intruder. But in certain installations and sonic works, it's everything. A note held too long. A whisper repeated. A tone that vibrates in your ribs but never resolves. It's not music in the background, it's the foreground. And it has an agenda, to slow you down, to quiet your brain, to open space inside you that you didn't even know was full. Here's the psychological trick: when the environment becomes quiet, your attention sharpens. A 2015 neuroscience study from Duke University showed that periods of intentional silence actually activate the brain's default mode network, the same area triggered by meditation, daydreaming, and deep introspection. That's right, silence is not the absence of stimulation. It's its own kind of stimulus. One your nervous system doesn't just tolerate, it craves. And that's what sound artists know. They don't just compose, they sculpt silence. Think of John Cage's infamous piece 4 feet 33 inches, where the musician sits at a piano and plays nothing. The performance is the ambient sound of the room, rustling programs, coughing, shifting bodies. At the time, people thought it was a joke. Now? It's a landmark of sonic mindfulness. But let's move to modern work. Artists like Janet Cardiff create soundwalks, recorded audio experiences you listen to as you walk through real space. Her voice might guide you down a hallway, narrating observations in your ear. Then, suddenly, footsteps behind you. A bird call. A door slam that isn't really there. You begin to question what's real. Not in a scary way, in a hyper-present way. You become aware of everything. That's the core of mindful listening. You stop filtering. You hear the high whine of a light fixture. The texture of your own breath. The rhythm of your heartbeat. This is interoception and exteroception converging, your inner and outer senses syncing like musicians in an avant-garde jazz band. And sometimes, sound isn't just passive. Sometimes, it asks something of you. Enter the sound bath. Technically not art, but it lives in many contemporary galleries now, rooms where gongs, crystal bowls, or deep tones are played live to lull you into theta brainwave states. Fringe? Sure. But participants often leave glassy-eyed, reporting visions, clarity, or just feeling like my brain got a hug. That's not nothing. In one installation, artist Zimmon used hundreds of tiny motors and cotton balls to create low-level rhythmic sounds across a warehouse space. The effect? Not chaos, but calm. Viewers described it as auditory rain, something familiar, nonverbal, gently overwhelming. Psychologists call this kind of sonic environment a non-narrative loop. Your brain can't predict it, but it doesn't fear it either. So it lets go. Philosophers still argue whether sound is felt or interpreted. Is a low drone just a pitch? Or is it sadness, waiting to be named? Mindfulness, again, sidesteps the argument. It says, don't name it. Feel it. Let the tone move through you. Notice where it lands, in your spine, in your stomach, in the back of your throat. Sound art also messes with time. Unlike paintings, which you can skim, a sound piece demands duration. You can't hear all of it at once. You have to stay. This enforced patience is its own mindfulness exercise. It's a gentle dare. How long can you listen without needing a shift, a beat drop, a climax? And in that waiting, something strange can happen. The mind softens. The inner monologue slows. You notice you're inside the sound, not just receiving it. Like how a foghorn feels like it passes through your ribs. Like how chanting, whether Gregorian, Vedic, or monastic, doesn't just fill a room. It fills you. Here's a delightful fringe tidbit. Some modern galleries have started installing quiet pods, not exhibits, but sensory reset zones. Padded seats. No visuals. Just soft ambient tones. People sit in them as long as they want. Some fall asleep. Others meditate. One person reportedly wrote a love letter to their ex while inside, claiming the sound made me remember how to breathe. We love a good accidental therapy booth. You might be asking, can I experience this outside a gallery? Of course. Your world is full of accidental sound art. The hum of your fridge. A fan spinning slowly. Traffic in the distance at 2 a.m. All of these can become mindful when you listen to them on purpose. That's the difference. Not what you hear, but how you hear it. Try this tomorrow. Set a 5-minute timer. Sit somewhere, anywhere. Close your eyes. And just listen. Catalog every sound. Don't judge. Don't interpret. Just hear. When your thoughts wander, return to the present soundscape. That's mindfulness in its rawest form. And it's free. Because at the end of the day, the world doesn't stop making art just because you're busy. It hums. Whispers. Vibrates. All you have to do is notice. And when you do, even silence begins to sing. Your phone buzzes. Your fingers twitch. You check the time, swipe a notification, adjust your screen brightness. You are, let's be honest, officially back online. And so is the art. Welcome to the pixelated playground of digital mindfulness, where artists turn screens, code, and glitches into tools for attention, not distraction. It sounds contradictory, right? The very thing that steals your focus might also be the thing that restores it? But that's exactly the territory we're stepping into, the strange, glitchy intersection between technology and presence. And yes, it's possible to find stillness here. Digital art gets a bad rap: fast, flashy, endless. But there's a growing wave of creators flipping the script. Instead of feeding the dopamine loop, they build pieces that interrupt it. A 2021 study from the MIT Media Lab even coined a term, pause tech, art that slows your scrolling, pulls you into a breath, or invites intentional interaction. Imagine an app that asks you not to post, but to observe. That guides you through watching a digital flower bloom in real time over 30 minutes. No buttons. No progress bar. Just waiting. That's not gamification. That's meditation, by design. Take artist Raphael Lozano-Hemmer. His interactive installations blend biometric data, like your pulse or breath, into light and sound. Stand in front of one piece, and the artwork pulses with your heartbeat. Not metaphorically. Literally. You become the art. Your own biology mirrored in digital form. Viewers report a weird mix of intimacy and awe. One even said, "I forgot I was on my phone for a whole 10 minutes." In 2024, that's practically enlightenment. Or consider Jenny Halser's scrolling LED word sculptures. Words move slowly across a screen, provocative, poetic, or quietly mundane. You read. You wait. You read again. The rhythm pulls you out of your usual screen speed. It demands attention, not distraction. Philosophers still argue whether digital art can ever be real. Is it too ephemeral? Too editable? Too easy? But mindfulness doesn't care how the pixels got there. It only cares what you do with them. And if a looped video of falling snow on a digital canvas makes you breathe deeper, who's to say that's not as real as oil on linen? Here's something surprisingly lovely: mindfulness-based VR. It's a thing. Artists are using virtual reality to build meditative environments, floating temples, endless meadows, cosmic voids. You don a headset and enter a space that responds to your gaze, your breath, your stillness. The calmer you are, the more the scene blooms. It's like a breathing exercise, but the forest is watching you back. A 2022 meta-analysis in the journal Consciousness and Cognition found that immersive digital environments, when designed for slowness and sensory engagement, improve mood, reduce anxiety, and even increase offline focus afterward. The kicker? The more realistic the digital world, the more your brain treats it like real experience. Mindfulness, it turns out, isn't fussy. Simulated presence still counts. Let's get quirky. An artist once created a browser extension that, every hour, replaces one of your website's ads with a mindful message. Notice your breath. Unclench your jaw. Look away from the screen for 10 seconds. At first, users hated it. Then, they didn't. A follow-up survey showed 68% felt less tense and 43% said they started noticing how often they were not noticing. That's awareness hacking. That's digital art as inner mirror. It's not all headsets and code, though. Even GIFs, those endlessly looping animations, can become meditative. Artists like David Sockley create looping abstract visuals that function like digital mandalas. Watch long enough, and your breath sinks to the movement. Time melts. You're not on a screen anymore. You're inside rhythm. Digital artists also use glitch as a mindfulness tool. A corrupted image, a stuttering loop, a broken interface, these moments jolt you into awareness. They force you to pause. To notice the illusion. One artist described it as showing the seams of the simulation. And once you see the seams, you start looking differently. And this brings us to perhaps the most radical act of all: stillness in the scroll. Some artists create Instagram accounts or TikTok loops that don't perform. No music. No cuts. Just a leaf in the wind. A boiling pot of tea. A hand tracing a line on sand. These digital pieces defy the algorithm. They don't entertain. They exist. Like a Zen koan for your feed. Mindful tech art also challenges attention with duration. Works that last an hour. Or 12. Or even forever, like websites that evolve based on real-time weather data or global breathing patterns. The longer you stay, the deeper the experience becomes. That's a direct inversion of social media's economy of seconds. Here's your practice. Next time you find yourself mindlessly scrolling, stop at the least flashy post. Stay there. Watch it twice. Then a third time. Notice your reaction. The itch to move on. The breath you've been holding. That's not just boredom. That's awareness surfacing. Because mindfulness in the digital age isn't about ditching screens, it's about reclaiming them. Turning your attention from being mined to being refined. So yes, digital mindfulness is real. And no, your phone isn't the enemy. It's just a mirror. A tool. A portal. And depending on how you use it, it can either drain your focus or lead you right back to it. You step through sliding glass doors. Cool air greets your skin. The hum of voices drops to a hush. The floor clicks beneath your shoes. Walls rise in silence. The museum. It feels sacred, not in a religious sense, but in the way libraries or mountains do. A place where people lower their voices without being told. Where you automatically slow your step. This is no accident. This is the psychology of spatial mindfulness. Let's rethink the museum not as an archive of objects, but as a design space for attention. A curated environment that, whether you realize it or not, is sculpting your pace, your breath, your gaze. And in doing so, it becomes a meditative space, sometimes more effective than any yoga studio. Start with the pacing. Ever notice how galleries are laid out like slow mazes? No escalators. No flashing signs. Just long, quiet corridors that force you to move deliberately from one piece to the next. A 2018 study from the University of Basel found that walking through a traditional museum significantly reduced participants' stress markers, even if they didn't stop to look at the art. The space alone, its silence, its symmetry, its rhythm, was enough. Why? Because museums are attentional sanctuaries. They protect your focus. Here, nothing moves unless you do. The lighting is soft, directional. The walls are blank, making each artwork the only thing your eyes can rest on. Your phone doesn't work well in the thick walls. Your notifications become muffled. You're being nudged into a singular state, presence. And it works. A quiet psychological principle known as environmental priming tells us that our behavior is shaped by our surroundings, often unconsciously. When we enter spaces that look, sound, and feel calm, we behave calmly. And in that calm, mindfulness becomes not just possible, but almost inevitable. Let's zoom in on museum benches. You know the ones, placed just far enough from a piece for full-frame viewing, rarely comfortable, often empty. They're invitations. Not to rest. But to stay. To look longer. In one experiment, researchers tracked how long visitors looked at paintings with and without benches in front of them. With benches, up to 300% longer. That's time enough for breath to deepen, thoughts to slow, awareness to emerge. And then there are the white cube rooms, pure white walls, gray floors, nothing to distract. Some people find them sterile. Others find them profoundly soothing. The lack of visual clutter mimics sensory deprivation chambers. Your mind, relieved of constant stimuli, opens up. Some visitors describe almost meditative states after walking through 2 or 3 of these rooms in a row. No mantra needed, just monochrome walls and stillness. Philosophers still argue whether museums elevate art or entomb it. Is a painting more powerful when it's isolated and silent, or does that strip it of context and meaning? Does the calm of the gallery deaden the work, or amplify it? Again, mindfulness sidesteps the fight. It doesn't ask what art should be. It asks, what is your experience of it, right now, in this body, in this breath? Want a more sensory example? The quiet echo of your footsteps in a sculpture hall. The smell of polished wood and old varnish. The subtle whoosh of HVAC systems keeping the temperature exactly stable. These aren't distractions. They're part of the experience. Little anchors. Little cues to tune in. Then there are the guards, still, silent, watching. They rarely speak, but their presence shapes your behavior. Not in a bad way. In a focused way. You walk with intention. You think before you move. Your body awareness increases. This, too, is part of the mindful container. You become more aware of being aware. Some museums are even designing dedicated mindfulness paths, routes that guide visitors through carefully sequenced works meant to evoke emotional progression, curiosity, calm, empathy, reflection. These aren't random layouts. They're curated journeys for the psyche. And here's a fascinating fringe case. The Mori Art Museum in Tokyo once staged an exhibition where viewers were given wireless headphones that whispered mindfulness cues as they walked. Notice the temperature of the room. Feel the weight of your feet. Let this color wash over you. The result? Deeper emotional responses to the art, and a marked increase in time spent with each piece. One person stayed for 6 hours and claimed it was better than therapy. Museums also serve as liminal spaces. You leave the noise of life outside. Inside, there's no shopping, no emails, no multitasking. Time gets fuzzy. You're between things. In that in-between, your nervous system resets. Here's a tip: next time you visit a museum, don't try to see everything. Pick 5 pieces. That's it. 5 works to sit with. Really sit. Breathe. Notice your posture. Let your mind wander. Then bring it back. Use the room as your meditation cushion. Use the art as your focal point. Use the silence like incense. Even better? Visit solo. Let yourself become a shadow among others. No conversation. No commentary. Just you, the art, and the space between. You'll notice more. Feel more. Maybe even remember more. And that memory won't just be of a painting. It'll be of a state. A rare moment where the world slowed enough for you to meet yourself again. A moment curated not just by the artist, but by the architects, the lighting designers, the people who made sure the hum of the room was just the right frequency to let your mind breathe. Because sometimes, mindfulness doesn't come from inside. Sometimes it's built, brick by brick, into the very walls that hold the stillness. You're home now. Maybe it's evening. Maybe a candle flickers nearby. You've taken in a lot: quiet canvases, mirrored rooms, murmuring installations. But now the question lingers in the air like incense: what about you? What if mindfulness in art isn't just something to witness, but something to do? This section is your bridge, from gallery walls to your kitchen table, your notebook, your paint-stained fingers. Let's talk about mindful art making. No, you don't need to be an artist. You don't even need to be creative. You just need to show up, with breath, with hands, with curiosity. The rest? That's the art. Here's the core idea: what you make doesn't matter. What matters is how you make it. You're not creating to impress, or express, or sell. You're creating to pay attention. To the pencil, the paper, the tremor in your fingers. To the thought that arises and dissolves. This isn't about masterpieces. This is about noticing. In psychological terms, this is a form of active meditation. A 2017 study in Art Therapy, Journal of the American Art Therapy Association, found that just 45 minutes of freeform creative activity significantly reduced cortisol levels in participants, regardless of skill level. That's right, doodlers, scribblers, and I can't draw a stick figure folks all benefited the same. Start simple. A blank sheet. A pen. A color you're drawn to. Set a timer for 10 minutes. Breathe. And begin. Draw circles. Repeat a shape. Fill the space slowly. When thoughts arise, judgment, boredom, brilliance, notice them. Let them float past. Return to the hand. Return to the line. This is the rhythm: breathe, notice, move, repeat. One beloved practice in mindful art making is the mandala, circular designs, often symmetrical, often meditative. In Buddhist traditions, they symbolize the universe. In therapy, they become containment fields for emotion. In your notebook, they can be whatever you need them to be. The act of drawing outward from a center, or inward toward one, trains your focus in ways words can't touch. Fringe example? An artist in Maine spends every morning drawing one continuous line for 15 minutes without lifting her pen. She calls it tracing the breath. Some days, the line is tight and tangled. Other days, open and wide. She never interprets. She just draws. That's not illustration. That's attention training. Philosophers still argue whether making art mindfully makes it better. Some say yes, presence sharpens quality. Others say the goal isn't output at all. But when you're sitting in silence, filling a page with simple color or line, the debate feels far away. What matters is the sensation of being here. Of doing without rushing. And it's not all drawing. Collage is another powerful form of mindful making. Cut. Tear. Arrange. Glue. Repeat. No plan. No theme. Just the act of choosing one thing over another, not with logic, but with felt sense. The page becomes a map of decisions made in real time. A mirror of your intuition. Or try sculpting. With clay. With foil. With Play-Doh, even. The tactile sensation alone is enough to drop you into mindfulness. Press. Roll. Notice the temperature of the material. How it resists. How it yields. That's dialogue. That's presence. Don't have supplies? Try movement drawing, standing with a pen and letting your arm lead, not your hand. Or blind contour drawing, drawing an object without looking at your paper. You'll make wild, squiggly nonsense. But you'll see more. You'll observe more deeply. That's the point. A key aspect of mindful making is letting go of outcome. You're not trying to get it right. You're trying to notice when you want to. And then, gently, not. That's meta-mindfulness. Watching your watcher. Smiling at your need to fix, to perfect, to control. And here's the thing, the more you do this, the more it spills into your life. Washing dishes becomes a texture meditation. Folding laundry becomes a composition of color and shape. Your commute becomes a moving gallery of unnoticed detail. This is where mindfulness and art melt together, not as separate activities, but as a way of being. Some people make daily sketchbooks. Not for skill. For reflection. A single mark per day. A color that sums up the mood. A gesture for an emotion. Over time, these books become visual journals, not of events, but of presence. There's also group practice. Shared silence. Everyone making their own thing, together. No feedback. No critique. Just the collective hum of awareness. Breathing. Scribbling. Sensing. Studios are starting to offer these now. They call them stillness circles. People leave lighter. Quieter. Sometimes, they don't even speak as they go. You might be thinking, I don't have time. But here's the reframe. What if 5 minutes of drawing a circle gave you back 20 minutes of calm? What if 10 minutes of collage made your brain less brittle? What if the act of coloring outside the lines reminded you you're not stuck? So tonight, after this video ends, maybe grab a scrap of paper. A pen. Draw a shape. Any shape. Repeat it. Let it ripple. Breathe with it. Let your body lead. Let your thoughts come and go like birds. Because in this small act, you're doing something ancient. You're joining the long line of humans who've used marks, shapes, colors, and patterns to meet the moment. To say, I was here. I noticed. I felt. I made this, not for the world, but for the moment itself. And that's more than enough. And now we arrive at the end, or rather, the widening. The point where reflection begins to loop back around into presence. You've wandered through galleries of silence, stared into colors that hummed at your bones, stood among glowing orbs, floating mirrors, soft noises, and strangers who suddenly felt like co-witnesses to something wordless. But here's the real question, what has all this changed in you? You didn't just observe mindful art. You practiced mindfulness through art. Without sitting cross-legged. Without downloading an app. Just you, your breath, and 1,000 little invitations, textures, sounds, flickers of shadow, pulling you deeper into the now. And what now? What does this mean for your daily life, your culture, your attention? Let's unpack that, gently. First, there's the fact that mindfulness in modern art is no longer niche. It's everywhere, quietly revolutionizing how we design spaces, how we teach, how we cope. Museums are becoming mental health sanctuaries. Schools are integrating mindful drawing into stress reduction programs. Even hospitals now display rotating installations designed not just for beauty, but for recovery. A 2020 initiative in Canada brought minimalist paintings into chemotherapy centers. The result? Patients reported lower pain perception and more emotional resilience. That's not just nice. That's necessary. And this doesn't stop with institutions. It drips into culture like watercolor on wet paper. Artists are meditating before creation. Coders are designing apps that slow attention instead of stealing it. Teenagers are learning to draw not for likes, but for grounding. Even social media, yes, the ultimate chaos vortex, has mindful corners now. Accounts that post one image a day. Long captions that invite slowness. Artists live streaming their quiet process. It's happening. You're part of it. Philosophers still argue whether art can change society or merely reflect it. But in the case of mindfulness, the answer might be both. Each time you choose to sit with a work, rather than swipe past, you model something rare. You remind others that presence is possible, even here. Even now. Let's return to that idea of the next gallery visit. Because when you do walk into a museum again, or stumble upon a sculpture in a public park, or find yourself scrolling through digital art that makes you pause, you'll notice things differently. You'll remember to breathe. You'll give yourself time. Maybe you'll find yourself staring at a painting for 10 minutes instead of 2. Maybe you'll look at a smear of gray and feel, inexplicably, comforted. Maybe you'll walk into an installation and sit longer than expected, phone silent in your pocket. Maybe you'll feel the stillness brush against your ribs like velvet, and you'll stay there, just for a moment more. That's what art does when it's mindful. It doesn't demand your interpretation. It asks for your presence. And that changes everything. You might even begin to see your whole life as a kind of slow installation. The way morning light spills through your window. The curve of a mug. The sound of shoes in a hallway. A face at a crosswalk. Not grand, not curated, but felt. Alive. This moment as a canvas. Your awareness as the brush. And maybe, just maybe, next time you're overwhelmed, you'll remember the color meditation. Or the sculpture that grounded you. Or the sound that soothed. You'll return to your body, your breath, your noticing. Because art doesn't end when you leave the gallery. It follows you home. And presence? That's the piece you get to keep. So let's slow it down now. Let the images fade gently, soft brushstrokes disappearing into the edges of your memory. The echo of footsteps in marble halls growing distant. The buzz of neon art softening into quiet light behind your eyelids. You've traveled far, without ever leaving your room. Through silence and color. Through texture, sound, and presence. You've walked through a museum of the mind. And you didn't just watch. You stayed. You breathed. You noticed. Feel your own weight now, supported. The stillness of your limbs. The small sounds around you. Maybe the hush of a ceiling fan. Maybe your own steady breath, warm at the tip of your nose. Let it stretch. Let your awareness widen like the soft blur of dusk. There's nothing to fix now. Nothing to name. The art of attention doesn't ask you to understand, just to be with. This breath. This body. This night. Maybe tomorrow you'll pick up a pen. Or walk slower through a hallway. Or pause at a crack of sunlight on a wooden floor and see it, not as background, but as something holy. That's the gift mindfulness gives. Not more time. But deeper time. Time that listens. And here, now, as you soften into sleep or stillness or whatever your night holds, know that you've been part of something rare. A quiet resistance against the noise. A whispered yes to attention. And a gentle step closer to yourself. You're here. You've always been. Sweet dreams.